Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the Farmer Files. So I am working with a new microphone and for some reason I can't hear it when I'm trying to replay on Audacity right now. So I'm going to record on the hopes that the bars on the screen mean this really is recording. And maybe I could figure out what's wrong with my speakers later. So, hello and welcome to the Farmer Files. As promised, today we will be venturing into the Old World mythologies, specifically the Celtic myths of Ireland and Scotland, respectively. The Llorona myth has often been labeled the Meso-American Banshee, and it does indeed share many similarities with the seed mythology family of the Celts. In order to give a proper account of the Banshee, we must take a deep dive into Celtic culture, which I hope you will find as interesting as I. A few things to clear up before we start. First, the episode is supposed to be about Llorona, so why are we discussing the Banshee? We are discussing the Banshee because of the Llorona myth. These nations were divided by time and seas and have never known to intermingle. The similarities and persistence of a figure like Llorona throughout history speaks to the validity of and hints to the foundations of the Llorona myth, and therefore must be analyzed. 2. The term banshee is misleading. The term is the result of Englishmen's lack of understanding of the Celtic culture, and also the inability to properly pronounce and spell the proper names of these myths. In addition, individuals who do not properly understand the mythologies combine several different mythologies into one, artificially creating today's typical banshee. These misinterpretations were then amplified by pop culture, which was then further mauled by the entertainment industry. Hollywood saw a great opportunity for a horror story and seeded these incorrect assertions into the public mind, which then became public knowledge. The banshee is therefore a combination of two different creatures, the Banshee and the Banshee, using the Irish names, and I'm sure I'm probably not pronouncing it right either, but we're taking our best go at it here. These go by slightly different names according to culture and religion. And region, with all having slight variations. For simplicity, we will be covering only a minimal number of variations here. The typical Americanized banshee is a very simple concept. A woman who is usually murdered by her husband is seen with long flowing hair and dressed in white. She is incorporeal, generally ragged, and screams in a terrifyingly high-pitched and loud manner in order to announce the deaths of those that hear the scream. In some variations, she murders her victims or simply scares them to death, perhaps coincidentally. In others, her scream is simply meant to announce the death, which will inevitably occur. Simply seeing the banshee is not generally an omen of death or evil, although pop culture tends to pair the screaming of the banshee with her appearing, generally directly in front of the victim in terrifying manner. This version of the banshee originates from the aforementioned misinterpretations, as well as from the 1958 film Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Ancient Texts author Mary Jones explains that this film was born from the conflation of the Keening Banshee, I believe is the right pronunciation, with the soul-devouring myth of the Wild Hunt. That being said, what was the original Banshee? She is S-I-D-H-E. I thought it was pronounced seed at first, but it's actually she. So, Banshee, it's easy to see how you got there. See refers to a hill or a burial mound, and Banshee can be translated as woman of the hill. As woman of the hill, fairy of the hill, fairy of the mounds, or woman of the fairy mounds. The Banshee was not an individual creature, but a class or a race of creatures. Each Celtic clan, the O'Neills for example, had their own individual Banshee, with their own description and appearances. Some had red hair, others had black, brown, or even white. Some were dressed in mourning clothes, others dressed in burial linens. High clans often had beautifully dressed Banshee. One description dressed her in forest green with a gray fur cloak and flowing red hair. These creatures also had differences in how they vocalized. Some sang sad dirges to announce death. Most often, however, they would keen, a word not often used in today's vocabulary. According to Webster's 4th edition revised and updated New World Dictionary, Keening is, quote, to make a mournful wailing sound, unquote, and as an adjective can mean cutting or intense. A website dedicated to the history and genetic tracing of the O'Neill clan, one of the oldest Celtic clans in existence, explains as such, quote, in Cokerry, in the southwest of Ireland, the sound is experienced as a low, pleasant singing, and Tyrone in the north as the sound of two boards being struck together, and on Rathlin Island as a thin, screeching sound somewhere between the wail of a woman and the moan of an owl, unquote. Oh, not unquote. With her mournful and melancholy cry, bewails the misfortune about to fall on the family she loves, unquote. Death was not considered in most cases to be unavoidable. If one heard the cry of the Banshee, it could be taken as a warning. If one heard the cry before battle, for example, it foresaw grim consequences of the battle. This has resulted throughout Irish history in sudden battle plan changes that resulted in unexpected victory. These victories were then attributed to the assistance and warning of the clan Banshee, known as the Banshee to the Scots. The Bianni are considered by many to be a subtype of the Banshee race, similar to how not all fingers are thumbs, but all thumbs are fingers. Not all Banshee are Benni, but all Benni are Benseed. Similar to how a cheat. Okay, I could skip that. I think the thumb reference was a much better one. The Benni features the more malevolent, waterborne death and violence towards children that is seen in the Llorona myth. She was considered to be the spirit of young mothers who died in labor and whose bodies were afterwards treated with disrespect. Women who died alone and had no one to bury them, or women who were buried in dirty or bloodied grave linens, were supposedly reincarnated as Benni. These were nasty, hunchbacked women with frogs' feet, dressed in dirty grave linens or nothing at all. They would appear to one doomed to die, or to whomever was unfortunate enough to pass by at the wrong time, washing bloody linens. The bloody linens represent the linens of the one to die. If one could sneak up on the old woman and claim to be her foster child, she would either spare their life or tell them who was supposed to die. Children who were unfortunate enough to see her would often be violently attacked and drowned, or struck with the water-soaked linens. The linens would be so heavy with water and blood, the children were left paralyzed and would die if no one found them soon enough. The origin of the Banshee and its underlings is interesting. The O'Neill website even goes so far as to state, quote, some theolopists and adherents of the Celtic Christians even believe that the Banshee figures are angels who fell and were trapped on earth, unquote, something which piqued my interest intensely immediately. I did a little more research through Britannica and other sites and discovered more about this theory. While it may seem a digression, I hope I could tie it together in the end for you. I found it extremely fascinating. Celtic history believed that Ireland was inhabited by the Tuatha Dé Danann, a race of, quote, gods, which were cast down from the heavens because of their knowledge and practice of magic, long before the ancestors of the modern Irish arrived. The Tuatha Dé Danann came bearing magic, gifts, and wise men, and defeated the native population of Ireland, thus taking it over and ruling. The infamous Stone of Tara was a gift from this race. There is not a description of the race in general. However, one of the king's daughters was described as being abnormally tall, having fair features, and having red hair and blue eyes. The Tuatha Dé Danann fought amongst themselves for some time over the throne, a history which is intricate and interesting but does not concern us here. The Tuatha Dé Danann were ultimately defeated, however, by the Milesians. The Milesians claimed that they had a, quote, ancient right to the land. However, my research could not uncover what this perceived right was. I am interested in what that might have been. Nevertheless, in a grand battle befitting of the Irish, the Tuatha Dé Danann were defeated by the Milesians. The Milesians took over and are the ancestors of modern-day Irish, Scots, and the inhabitants of the Isle of Man, according to myth. The spirits of the slain Tuatha Dé Danann were then driven underground and were locked underneath the mounds. These deceased spirits became the Banshee and are considered responsible for all of the spirits of modern-day Ireland as well, such as the fairies. Quote, the Tuatha Dé Danann were defeated and consigned to mythology. Legend has it that they were allowed to stay in Ireland, but only underground. Thus they became the bearers of the fairies of Ireland, consigned to the underworld, where they became known as the Aishi. Aishi? Not sure how to pronounce that. Unquote. That's from irishinformation.org, a supposedly very official website. And such concludes our story of La Llorona and its possible origins. The validity of this belief is up for you to decide. However, through my search, I have come to believe personally that this may be the recurrence of a being or class of beings of a biblical nature who have been seen in numerous areas of the globe and inspired the mythologies of many cultures since before the flood of Noah. I believe that the La Llorona myth predates the Aztecs and even predates the Celtics, but has significant ties to both of these cultures as well as many others. Weeping foreseers of death are prominent throughout the history of the world, even occurring in Oriental mythos. I hope that you have enjoyed this special on La Llorona as much as I have enjoyed doing the research, and that you will join us for our next episode, where, if I recall correctly, we will be discussing shadow people and shadow walkers. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. You may have noticed earlier that I put a special emphasis on the term mounds and the entities that are locked under the mounds. If you would like to know more about why I place such emphasis on this, I would like you to look up on Prime Video a movie by L.A. Marzulli. It's called The Mystery of the Mound Builders in the United States, and I believe that you will find it absolutely fascinating, and in some ways it does align with this. But I promise 3 videos on this, not 4, although I could easily do a 10-episode special. So we're not going to go into the Christian relations here. So I hope the mic worked enough to actually record this. I still have the spikies, but I can't hear it. So we'll see. Thank you very much, everyone.